Okay, in this video we're going to do an overview of the implant abutment procedure. This case is actually in your software, so you're able to practice this on your own once you load the InLab 4.0 software. So we're going to do an abutment on tooth number 14. We're actually going to do a split file where we design the crown first and then split it into your anatomic abutment. So like we've discussed in other videos, we'll choose single restoration, abutment. We're going to do this biogeneric individual, and since we're splitting the file, we're going to choose multilayer. Lastly, we'll go ahead and choose the tooth. And when you choose a tooth, it'll bring up all your options. The ones in green, you've obviously defined the restoration, selected your milling unit. We have to do 3 steps before we're able to move on to the scan phase. First, we select our implant type, which for this example, we'll just choose the first one, Freodent, but choose your implant type. Then you're going to choose your veneering structure material, which is basically what you want your crown to be made out of. We'll choose Ivoclar, Emax, and then choose the framework material, which you only at this time have one option, which is the Sirona Mesioblock. When you hit OK, you now can move on to the scan phase. So we'll go ahead and click on that. Okay, this is a pretty easy case, and so when I do the routine cases, I always just scan 4 catalogs. We'll do the lower arch, I'll do the upper jaw, which includes the scan body for tooth number 14. I will do the buccal bite articulation. So here's our scan body. And generally when I do the scan body, I like to do it personally in the mouth if at all possible. I go ahead and screw in the titanium base, then place the scan body over the top. If the implant's not placed too deeply, it's not that difficult to do. If it's deep, we'll obviously do it indirectly and take an implant level impression. So we'll obviously take a buccal bite to articulate those 2 jaws. And then lastly, it's very important that you relate your gingiva. So I'll always take a gingiva scan. The gingiva mask is kind of like the biocopy. So when you take the gingiva, it's going to go up into your upper right-hand corner of the screen. And as soon as it can stitch to your preparation jaw or your scan body jaw, it'll go ahead and overlay over the top. I take the gingiva mask generally after as the last picture. So after I'm done taking the images of the posing, the buccal bite, and the scan body, I'll go ahead and remove the scan body, remove the titanium base, and then I'll scan the tissue with nothing in there prior to putting the healing cap back on. So these are the 4 catalogs I take. Once you're done with that, we'll go to the model phase. The first step is we clearly have to articulate the buccal bite. You have the option to edit the model before, after, or during the buccal bite articulation. We need to set the model axis always with InLab, so we'll go ahead and click on that. You can see it's already lined up here, so we've got it correctly placed in the arch horseshoe. The midline's lined up. If we look at this upper one, that's the other important one. You really want to try to make sure that the midline is perpendicular to the horizontal line to set your maxillary plane. That will give you the best proposal available. So when you're done with that, we'll click OK and move on to the next step. The biggest place people are going to make mistakes initially is many of us are not used to trimming the margin when we do our crown or direct restorations. So what we need to do is we always have to remember it's absolutely critical to trim the model when doing abutments. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start by just drawing a circular line around the scan body. If you don't do this, you'll know right away, because when you get your crown proposal in later steps, it'll actually take half of the adjacent teeth away. So you'll know right away that you made a mistake. So after you trim the area, the next step in red is click scan body head. So that's as simple as actually just putting your cursor right at the tip of that triangle and double clicking. Okay, so if we go ahead and do that, notice use gingiva mask is highlighted. Now that means we want the margin to be laid down on the gingiva. So almost always, if I can, that's the best way to design. We'll go through in other videos why you would not do that. In particular, if your gingiva was really rough and rippled, you might not want to do that. Or if your titanium base is above the level of the tissue, you cannot do this method. But for this easy example, we'll go ahead and use the gingiva mask. We'll go ahead and double click at the tip, and it's going to propose our margin on the gingiva. Okay, so you see that. Now, a lot of times people will recommend to go ahead and start redrawing that line to the base of the gingiva. It's not necessary. There's many steps you can correct that, so I just leave it where it's initially proposed. You can see the red dotted line coming out of the implant. That is the long axis of the actual implant placement, which is important because if the implant's off axis or it's poorly placed, you have the ability in the next step, which is define restoration axis, to actually angle the insertion of the actual custom abutment. So here we can see our implant is relatively well placed. The yellow line is the long axis of our custom abutment, and so in this case I'm probably going to line up the long axis of the custom abutment right to the long axis of the implant, that red dotted line. In the cases where you have a poor implant placement, you can correct yourself a little bit in this stage. You can actually alter the insertion or alter the angulation up to 20 degrees. If you go more than 20 degrees, you'll know it turns red. Okay, so we'll go ahead and line that up where we would like, click OK, and move on to the next step. There are other parameter videos in the parameter sections that will go over the parameters for implants. We'll touch on them as we go here, but I'm just going to set these really quickly. And so for the top layer parameters, really we're just placing the parameters like we would for a full contour crown. The only difference is we do not have a margin thickness because that would be on the bottom layer. Excuse me, there's no margin thickness because it's already a pre-manufactured attachment to that titanium base. So the bottom layer, these are the parameters. I usually put it maybe 200 microns below the tissues where I like my split line, a little bit of gingival pressure, and I always reduce the shoulder width down to maybe a half a millimeter, maybe 600, and the telescope angle to 6. Many of these you can switch on the fly later on. So we'll go ahead and hit OK and get our proposal. Okay, so at this stage, basically what you're going to do is, this is just designing a crown. So whatever you would normally do to design your crown, that's what you'll do here. Notice that it cut away all the tissues so you don't have any relation to for your emergence profile. That's the reason we actually took the gingiva picture, so we'll hit display options, upper gingiva, and now we can keep that on as we design our full contour crown. So just use your tools to design it. I'll do that very quickly here. Okay, so we went ahead and designed this full contour crown here. So you notice how I use the tissue to make that emergence profile the way it would be if I was actually doing a crown. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually go back to display options. We're going to turn off the tissue just to get an idea of how our actual emergence profile is down here. You know, I don't really like to have these concavities down here, so I personally like to make my circular shape a little smaller and kind of push some of this area out just to make it a little bit more smooth there. Okay, so you kind of get the picture there. You can do it however you would like. Get all these different areas out. Obviously here I would probably get rid of that concavity. And the last thing I would do is actually put back on my gingiva. I'm going to reduce it a little just so I can see through it, especially on that facial. And you can actually, if there's no pressure on the papilla, it's pink. As I move it forward, if it's all white, you know that this is all putting pressure on the papilla. You're not going to have any food traps or any black triangles. So at this point, you would go ahead and start with the actual abutment fabrication. We'll stop this first video here. In this part 1, we just showed you how to get to this first step, and in the second video, we'll show you how to finish the process on this sample case.